Welcome back, guys, to the Big Sky Podcast Network Power Rankings presented by Tubbs at the Club, meaning presented by Snake River Stampede Canadian Whiskey. I'm your host, Brian Marceau. And hey, if you're new to this show, this is Tubbs at the Club's covering the entire Big Sky show. So we present power rankings. Now, I'm going to say we cover power rankings loosely, especially like we're 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on who you're talking about, or Montana 1 week into the season. Power rankings only matter so much when we have this small sample size. So usually I talk about rankings to the extent that I think the rankings themselves are interesting. Good to see Ron Lowney joining us in the comment section. He's probably got some stuff to talk about from that. I'm not going to spoil the news, but full disclosure, one of our higher ranked teams does not yet have a W. Ron, you might know who we're talking about. We get voters who cover the Big Sky, whether that's for podcasts like FCS Fans Nation, Grizz Fan, Tubbs at the Club. We also have beat reporters who cover various Big Sky teams who vote, and then just people we know who are knowledgeable about the conference as a whole. That gives us our average rankings. But realistically, I'm mostly here to talk about what's interesting in the Big Sky. So without further ado, that's honestly, that's where we're going to start. But hey, we're starting the show. This is essentially Around the Bar presented by Hughes River Expedition. So if you're looking for a great all-inclusive week-long vacation, don't look past your backyard. Hughes River Expeditions has been Vandal-owned and operated since 1976 and are ready to take you on a vacation of a lifetime. Enjoy a multi-day trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River of no return, the Salmon River Canyon, or the Selway. Check out special trips like the one to see the Perced meteor shower. So look, the trips are fantastic. They're all-inclusive. Colin takes care of everything. Just bring your clothes. Let HRE handle the rest. Give them a call right now at 406-540-4450 or check them out at hughesriver.com. All right, so look, we're going to start at the bottom. I'm not really going to spend that much time talking about our bottom teams because I just don't think there's that much to know. Although actually for a couple, I think we just have things definitively. So, hey, Portland State. Top 5 Portland State. Look, they've had a new starting quarterback every single game. The Vikings are 0-3. They've been blown out every single game. Honestly, their best game so far came in week 2, which for them was their third week, losing to North Dakota 50-20. Now, North Dakota's good, so not trying to downplay what North Dakota can do. You know, they're a top 10 team. But I mean, it was a blowout from the first quarter on. It was 36-6 at half, and that's really all she wrote. So the big thing I'm just going to pay attention to for Portland State, just so you guys know, is it took the Vikings until their third game to get any points on the board whatsoever. They've had an extremely rough OOC, but with that OOC, they've shown us absolutely nothing. They've gained an average of 185 yards a game across 3 games while giving up over 500 yards per game. So we're done talking about Portland State. Next, we got Weber State at number 11. Weber State's another team that I just don't think we really know anything about Weber State. Like their early OOC has been super tough. They got beat by James Madison 45-10. They just lost to Arizona 48-3. Not much really to talk about Weber State. Now, other than to say in the next couple weeks, like their schedule becomes more normal. They've got McNeese coming up this week and then Butler following McNeese. If Weber State is any good whatsoever, they're going to have to be 2-2 going into Big Sky play. I cannot tell you what this team is going to hang its hat on. You guys know the nature of football in 2025. Things change. And when Weber has scored 13 points in 8 quarters while giving up over 45 in each game, again, against 2 good teams, James Madison and Arizona, I can't tell you if they can play any defense. I also cannot tell you if they have any sort of offense. Mickey Mental's an offensive guy, but everything's new for Weber State. So we're done. Again, like with teams we don't have much to talk about, like I'm just full disclosure, I'm just not really going to talk about them very much. Another team who looks lost, number 10, Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington, now, like they lost to Boise State 51-14. Kind of the story for Eastern is their starting quarterback, Jared Taylor. He's a running quarterback. He went down with a really bad looking injury. Looked like it might be head and neck related. So hoping things are okay for Taylor. Right now, Eastern's sitting at 0-2. They lost in week 1 to Incarnate Word 31-21. They did at least hang on a little bit there. And then the Boise State game was what it was. Eastern has 2 theoretically winnable games to close out of conference, traveling to Northern Iowa next week, then hosting Western Illinois. Just like Weber, if Eastern is going to have a prayer at being any good whatsoever, they have to be sitting at 2-2 at the end of out of conference play. What we do know about Weber, though, is this is not your Eastern. What we know about Eastern, this is not your Eastern Washington from the last 4 years or 14 years, more like it. Jared Taylor was running quarterback. They were running option plays. He's an okay passer, not a particularly great passer. So Eastern has hung their hat on being able to move the ball offensively and having strong offensive lines, and then just having garbage defenses for a long time. I think the garbage defense is still there, but I don't think this team's going to score the way they could previously, because I don't think they can pass the way they could previously, and I think that's going to hurt their ability to run the ball. So if I was going to take my temperature on Eastern right now, my temperature on Eastern is that I expect they're going to hang out around 10, 11, 12, something like that. I think Portland State, is the definitive team who the bottom has dropped out. I think Eastern is really jealous of that title, and they're they're not as bad as Portland State. So don't get me wrong there, but I think Eastern and Weber are very similar for different reasons, and they both have to win out in their OOC if there is any sort of prayer of salvaging this season. Really, the composition of the conference is kind of once you get through the top 6, 7 through 12 are not necessarily 7 through 11. Portland State's different, but 7 through 11 are not necessarily that different. So look, we just covered Eastern Washington. Going to get to one more team before we move on to a break. Cal Poly. Cal Poly, look, they just got killed 63-9 to Utah, and I don't think it's really worth covering that. Everyone knows Cal Poly cannot play defense. The game that you're looking at, if you're a Cal Poly fan, was their week 1 win over San Diego, 41-13. And quarterback Ty Diffenbach he was Big Sky Player of the Week, but week 1 was a little bit different. But Diffenbach did look, he was good, he was productive, and that was one of the questions Cal Poly had is, hey, how are they going to move the ball? Diffenbach against San Diego ran for 69 yards and a touchdown, went 18-27 for 263 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. So that might matter. Now, you could be saying, hey, well, whatever, San Diego's Pioneer League. Okay, San Diego this week beat Southern Utah, and the week before, Southern Utah murdered Idaho State. So I'm not saying, hey, the transitive property does not always matter for football, but I'm going to say for Cal Poly, they're at least on notice as, okay, maybe this is a team who's not quite as bad as we thought they might be in the preseason. If they're scoring the ball, we know they're not going to stop teams defensively. They lost Elijah Ponder to graduation in NFL last year, and Cal Poly was a very bad defensive team with him. There's no way that this Cal Poly defense is going to be much better. So look, their ticket to being productive is the Eastern Washington style of production. Is that they need to score a bunch of points, and with what I just would caution people against completely writing off the production against San Diego that. Cal Poly, there's no reason to believe they're good. 9 sounds like fair spot, but I don't think Cal Poly is necessarily going to be atrocious. Moving on from Cal Poly, our number 8 team, Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado, I actually find I have a soft spot in my heart for how bad Northern Colorado's been the last couple seasons. And first thing I'm going to say, Northern Colorado, they're sitting at 1-1. They beat D2 Chadron State in week 1 and lost starting quarterback Peter Castelli for the year. This week, honestly, Northern Colorado got completely screwed in a really, really shitty end of the game call. The new quarterback, Eric Gibson, went 17-28 for 160 yards and a touchdown. It should have been an interception, no touchdowns. It should have been for a few more than 160 yards and a touchdown, because the game-winning touchdown that Eric Gibson threw, which was clearly caught, was ruled incomplete. It got some national attention for what a garbage call it was. Final score for Northern Colorado against Colorado State. The Bears go down 21-10. to 17. The Bears have scored 17 in both games, so not necessarily. Again, like the phase one question for UNC is, hey, can they score the ball at all? And they scored 17 against a D2 team. Then they scored 17 with a new quarterback against an FBS Mountain West team. Do we know if they can score the ball? I would not yet give them any sort of vote of confidence. But the thing I'll look at is, hey, they held an FBS team. And no one's going to say Colorado State's good because they're not. But, they hung with an FBS team and should have picked up a win, which, by the way, has been a theme for quite a few Big Sky teams of shoulda, woulda, coulda put a Mountain West level team down. The Bears only gained 223 yards against Colorado State. They surrendered 371. So they did not exactly inspire anything that I'd call confidence here. But the Bears forced 5 turnovers out of Colorado State. I bring that up because Northern Colorado is the inverse of Cal Poly. If they're going to be good, they need games to be low scoring, and they need to be able to force turnovers. We have seen Northern Colorado have glimpses where in Ed Lamb's first 2 years, they looked like they could be a pretty solid defensive team. That was not persistent at all, and their offense was so bad that it made it virtually impossible for that UNC defense to ever get a breather these last couple of years. But that's what I think we should be looking at. If Northern Colorado is going to be kind of okay at all, they're going to have to keep games lower scoring. Honestly, the Colorado State template is what you would be looking at here. 8-ish sounds okay, but Northern Colorado is one of those teams right now that it's important to not overreact to a good outing against a probably bad FBS team. The teams 8 through 11. They're pretty damn interchangeable. Matchups are going to be dependent. I'm saying that to say, hey, would I definitively pick Northern Colorado over Eastern? No, because the matchup, I don't know if Northern Colorado can move the ball against anyone, and Eastern, they can't score like they did previously, but they're not going to be complete garbage on the offensive side of the ball. But I think even with the next team we're about to talk about, there's not that much different from Idaho State at number 7, who I'm now going to talk about, and all these other teams below them. Now, Idaho State has been the most up and down, I'd say, of this bottom half of the conference. Idaho State has 3 games under their belt so far. Oddly, in the 2 FBS games that Idaho State has played, they opened up with UNLV week 1. This week, Idaho State lost to New Mexico 32-22. And in week 2, Idaho State just got murdered against Southern Utah 46-24. Some developments to pay attention to with Idaho State is, I think what's going to dictate if Idaho State can be kind of okay at all is what can they do defensively. The New Mexico game was easily the best defensive outing from the Bengals this season. First 2 games this season against UNLV and Southern Utah, the Bengals were giving up an average of about 525 yards per game. Just were not stopping anyone. The difference was against UNLV, they were scoring. And that was just not happening against Southern Utah. Southern Utah, Jordan Cook, starting quarterback for the first 2 games, he gets injured. He had a procedure. He's out for the year. So against New Mexico, Idaho State bounced between freshman Davis Harsin and Jackson Sharman. Jackson Sharman has been with Idaho State. He's a freshman as well, but he's a name who's been popping up for Idaho State a little bit more than Davis Harsin. Davis Harsin, of course, the son of current, I don't know what his position is at Cal, what Brian Harsin's position is at Cal. I think he might be the offensive coordinator. But that's, the kind of pedigree that Harsin has. Harsin was more productive than Jackson Sharman. Sharman went 11-13 for 84 yards. Harsin went 17-26 for 181 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Reports I heard from people paying attention to that game said, hey, the offense obviously worked a little bit better with Davis Harsin under center. So I'm just saying here, expect Davis Harsin to start for Idaho State going forward. This week they've got Lincoln, the sub D1 whatever school. So it's going to be a win for Idaho State, but it's going to be nothing. They get to have a big matchup on the 27th at Northern Colorado with the number 8 team in our power rankings, which will dictate everything in this conference. But a takeaway for Idaho State, they have to be able to score the ball. Now, can they have a not worse? Can they have a defense that's not the worst in the league? In theory, yes. But Idaho State's schedule is murder, so that they're going to have to be a team that has more like the Cal Poly type of template where they're scoring the ball. Davis Harsin is, I think, the guy who's going to be who you're paying attention to for Idaho State moving forward. Before we get any further, we got to talk about another show sponsor, someone who came up big time for University of Idaho, and that was vandalgear.com, aka Pacific Custom Sportswear, aka home of the Fightin' Taters collection. So look, the Pacific Custom Sportswear, they're based out of Spokane. Vandal owned and operated for decades. They make fantastic sportswear. I have one of the Fightin' Taters shirts. You can buy them for $25 right now at Fightin' Taters or vandalgear.com. If you go to Home Field, they're $46. Now you might be thinking, well, Home Fields must be nicer. Absolutely not possible. I own the Fightin' Taters shirt from Pacific Custom Sportswear, and it's one of the nicest, softest, like University of Idaho shirts I've ever owned. So the quality is absolutely there, and the pricing is way better. And it's also, Big Sky owned and operated. So you want to check out some Vandal clothes you can't get elsewhere, or even if you're not a Vandal and you like the Fightin' Taters thing, because you should, it was fun. FightinTaters.com or vandalgear.com. Either way, that's the best place to go to get your Fightin' Tater shirt. So moving on now to some teams that are a little bit better, and there's a little bit more to talk about. Sacramento State, man, here's an eye of the beholder team to interpret here. So Sacramento State sits at 0-2. It is hard. The Sac State had a relatively rough first 2 weeks. They opened at South Dakota State, absolutely got their asses kicked. Sacramento State is under a bit more of a microscope because their university president absolutely cannot shut up online. And every time Sac State looks not that great, Sac State needed a little bit of time to get things together, which is not shocking with the volume of transfers. It's Dr. Luke Wood, the guy from Sacramento State. He just will not shut up. And when Sacramento State is not winning games, it doesn't look that good. So there's a little bit of a different microscope under Sac. I mean, Luke Wood also famously referred to the FCS as JV about why Sac State was trying to move up. And hey, Sac State has failed to move up. So that is just a story that's not going to vanish from Sac State until they start winning some games. New coach Brendan Marion, famous for the go-go offense at UNLV. It has not gone yet. And look, Sac State lost 20-17 to Nevada this week. Week 1, they lost 20-3 to South Dakota State. Now, South Dakota State looks very good, and Sacramento State looks quite ordinary at this point. Kind of the story to track with Sacramento State right now is there is just no way that Jane Rashada is going to keep passing. Rashada was pretty damn bad against South Dakota State. Against the Jackrabbits, he went 11-27 for no touchdowns and a pick. And also of note, I mean, just Sacramento State just could do nothing against South Dakota State. They're not close to that level. Now, thing to pay attention to, the guy who led Sac State in passing against Nevada was Cardell Williams, transfer from Tulsa, who has been a starter at the FBS level and produced. Now, Cardell Williams had game-winning touchdowns called back, but he also threw a game-winning touchdown to Nevada on this game. Williams went 11-13 for 158 yards, a touchdown, and one pick. So I thought this was a story that to really pay attention to is like, can Rashada even hold the job? Because Cardell Williams has produced at the FBS level, and Rashada has looked bad. But they pulled the trigger on the switch. But the other question is, with the rest of their schedule, Sacramento State, one of the staples of the go-go offense is that you do run the ball. Sac State has been terrible on the ground, and that's in spite of having some pretty good talent that has transferred into the program from some at the FBS level, some at the FCS level. But it just the thing to pay attention to, like Sac State, they've been able to do nothing on the ground whatsoever through their first couple of weeks. I know this is not apples to apples at all. But on the season, Sac State's averaging 2.6 yards a rush with one touchdown on the year. That's like Portland. That's barely better than Portland State. So that I think that's going to change for Sacramento State. Like it just has to. It's hard for me to imagine they could be. They have a good offensive coach, and now like, hey, they switched to Cardell Williams, who looks like he can play. It's hard for me to imagine they could possibly be that bad. Moving on. Now the schedule does them some favors. They've got Mercyhurst. That should be a rebound game. Central Arkansas is not in 2 weeks is for sure not a guaranteed win for Sac State. But the big question for them, they have talent, but they've just looked like a mess. I think if they ever become not a mess, Sacramento State could be a team that might compete for a playoff spot if they can get things together. But man, they need to be looking at they're another team. They got to be 2-2 in the out of conference if we're even thinking about playoffs, because I just think there's a lot for Sacramento State to put together. They've been a kind of like the poster child of teams in the FCS thinking the grass is greener elsewhere. This is Sac State's last year in the Big Sky. So like a lot of people in Big Sky don't care about Sac State. They don't like Dr. Luke Wood, and they want to see Sac fail at this point. A lot of that perception is completely due to Sacramento State, and getting your ass kicked these first 2 games when your president will not shut his goddamn mouth is not going to change any minds. But don't completely write Sac State off. I think the shift to Cardell Williams is going to matter. And I think that when you start to see Sacramento State be able to run the ball a little bit, that's when this team is going to switch over from garbage to dangerous. Will they be good at actually good at any point this year? I don't know. I wouldn't gamble a yes, but I would say I expect at some point, if Sac doesn't make the playoffs, they're at least going to spoil the playoff aspirations of a couple teams, or they're going to really hurt the seedings of some playoff teams heading into the future. Moving on from Sac State to number 5, Northern Arizona. Northern Arizona, they're another little eye of the beholder to interpret. And this is just how it is in the FCS. We know this scheduling. Not everyone can schedule a ton of out of conference FCS games. Sometimes you just kind of have to live with whatever the scheduling gods are going to give you. Northern Arizona beat Utah Tech this week 38-31. Now, for those keeping track, Utah Tech, who will be in the Big Sky next year, is sitting at 0-2 in Big Sky play, having lost to UC Davis last week. But twice Utah Tech has been competitive. They've got Idaho this week. So a question, can Utah Tech get over the hump, or can Idaho turn things around as far as Utah Tech playing close games against Big Sky? So some of what we've seen from NAU, who sits at 1-1, week 1, Northern Arizona lost to Arizona State. Completely ignored that, guys. This week, Northern Arizona has Southern Utah. That's something I'd pay a little bit more attention to. And then Northern Arizona has Incarnate Word. Is it possible for NAU to be 3-1 entering Big Sky play? That'd be a huge deal for NAU if they could. They have a schedule that could allow them, but it's not. I also am not completely sure that NAU is beyond what they were last season. But we do know from the one FCS game he's played, Ty Pennington went 21-28 for 229 yards, threw a touchdown and did throw 1 pick, also rushed for a touchdown and 47 yards. Seth Cromwell led NAU on the ground, 15 carries, 67 yards, 2 touchdowns. Thing I want to pay attention to, Ty Pennington. We know he's good. We know he's a bit of a dual threat. But the dude threw 2 total picks last year. He's already thrown 1 this year. Just FYI, he's going to throw more than 2 picks, and that's going to change a little bit of the composition of what NAU is. There's just no way around that. So NAU number 5 is probably where most people had NAU penciled in earlier. That once we're in the 5 spot, we're talking teams that are at least, if they're not in the playoffs for a fact, they're for a fact in the playoff discussion. NAU's done nothing to change that perception. Hit in the comment section real quick. Crewhead76 correcting me. Utah Tech, Dixie State. I remember Dixie State as a JUCO. I live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Ron Lowney saying the Southern Utah game for NAU will tell us a lot. I 100% agree with you, Ron. It'll tell us a little bit about Southern Utah as well. Southern Utah, as brought up earlier, lost to San Diego, who lost to Cal Poly. And that was, what does this all mean? It means his first couple weeks at FCS, and lots of teams have new dudes, and it takes a minute to get everything together. But once you're getting into week 3, week 4, like you're closing on conference play, this is when things do need to be together. The number 4 team in the conference, this is where it's a me. And hey, full disclosure, 4-3-2-1, I don't know how to really sort these teams. I'm just more using this as an excuse to talk. UC Davis, who look their week 1 game. And yes, I'm using this a little bit to catch up on the entire conference because I was not able to record week 1. I'll be back on the regular now, but wasn't able to do some of this earlier. UC Davis lost 70-10 to University of Washington. My takeaway: UW's good. Ignore this game. What have we learned from UC Davis in their other games? Now, hey, we don't have the Mercer official stats. We do have the Utah Tech official stats, but through those 2 games, one, UC Davis, they were dominating Mercer early, and then let off the gas. Mercer kind of took over. I think if that game finished, Mercer wins. Against Utah Tech, it was the inverse, where Davis did not show up for the first half, had scored 24 consecutive points to end up getting that W. So UC Davis is the team figuring things out. They're still up and down. Thing I'd pay attention to is defensively, like UC Davis, and particularly with the Connors twins, Rex and Porter. There's reason to believe they're going to continue to be a good Big Sky defense. Offensively, that the question is like, hey, this is a team that's identity is completely different, and what they are this year is they're just more quarterback centric this year than they had been previously. As in, Caden Pinnick, he's the starting quarterback against Utah Tech. 21-31, 253 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Also rushed 14 times for 14 yards as well. Yes, that counts sacks, but that style of play of he is a running threat as well as a solid passer. I'm not going to call Caden Pinnick like a best passer in the league by any means, but he's good. He's going to be in the discussion at the end of the year for the all-league teams, assuming he plays healthy. He's a little bit of a dual threat. And that's part of how UC Davis's identity is just going to change with the graduation of guys like Lan Larison and Hunter Rodriguez. Is they're going to be a little bit more reliant on the quarterback. I will say receiver Samuel Gabutu Jr., 4 catches, 2 touchdowns, 93 yards. He was preseason all-league. He looks like he's going to be a frequent and favorite target of Caden Bennett throughout the season. But the thing to track with Davis, they have been inconsistent across their 2 FCS games so far. They've played about half each game. What to take away from that, other than the fact that they're just being new, is 4 sounds right. 4 would put you like, hey, you're in the playoffs, probably not skipping the first round this early. That to me sounds fair for UC Davis. But all these 4 teams left, they are all going to have demerits in their in their resume this early on. Like Crewhead 76 says in the comment section, all roads lead to Cedar City. I mean, yes. And when you say that, if you mean like you can't fly directly to Cedar City, you have to drive there. Correct. Southern Utah, they'll be back in the Big Sky next year. Number 3. Now here, this is where, to me, especially 3-2-1, it's really hard to sort. And with Davis too. So 4-3-2-1, I think it's really hard to sort how you should feel about any of these teams moving, going 4-3-2-1. Because like with Davis, like, hey, they only have 1 loss to UW, but they very likely, like, they were trying to lose that Mercer game, and their 1 win came against Utah Tech, who, hey, maybe they're okay. This next team, number 3, University of Idaho. That's, my Vandals. I cover Tubbs the Club. That's an Idaho-centric show. So I was at the game this week against St. Thomas. Idaho, I think, has like a stronger resume than honestly of the other 4 teams right now. But some of that is extrapolating on some things that maybe should, maybe shouldn't. Week 1, Idaho goes down 13-10 to Washington State in Pullman in a game that Idaho absolutely should have won that game. The Vandals absolutely gave what would have been a huge W away. But like the story of that game for University of Idaho was the Vandals, like they were kind of anemic offensively. New quarterback Joshua Wood, week 1, throws for just 33 yards, but he did rush for 101 yards. So that's where he got his production. But Idaho, look, they were not very good on the offensive side of the ball against WSU. 221 total yards, 33 through the air. Wood rushed for 101. So like the running backs minus Wood, they averaged less than 3 yards a carry that game. The thing that was wild for Idaho is they held WSU. Now that's a WSU team coached by Jimmy Rogers, former South Dakota State coach. They held that team to 3 rushing yards. But that leads to the follow-up of like, okay, well, how'd you hold WSU to 3 rushing yards and find a way to lose the game? Well, WSU was able to move the ball through the air. Idaho had 2 huge turnovers plus a missed field goal and other missed opportunities. So that's that loss. But that's one of those good showings I could talk about with Idaho State. But there's a better showing than Idaho State had. It's a better showing than Sac State had against Nevada. But it's what do you interpret from a good showing against an FBS team? Other than to say, okay, there's probably talent, but hey, let's see what you do in follow-up weeks. This is where Idaho now is a little bit confusing. Idaho this week, they picked up a W hosting St. Thomas. St. Thomas, that's a Pioneer League team. Now, before you roll your eyes, St. Thomas sits at 1-1 after that loss to Idaho. Week 1, the St. Thomas Tommies beat Lindenwood 35-13. Now, you want to tell me Lindenwood's not very good, fine. But last year, St. Thomas lost to Lindenwood 64-0. So turning a 64-0 loss around into a 22-point win, that's an 86-point swing in 1 year against the exact same team. So you're not going to tell me St. Thomas is talent free, but at the same time, that's a Pioneer League team. So how do you interpret looking really good in a loss to an FBS team and then narrowly beating a Pioneer League team? I don't know. That's just where we're at. My takeaway is Idaho's good. I think they're definitely a playoff looking team. And honestly, the production of Idaho this game was the mirror of Idaho in game 1, where in game 1, Idaho looked damn good defensively, but they couldn't do anything on the offensive side of the ball. This week, no, man, Idaho was great on the offensive side of the ball. Joshua Wood accounted for 4 total touchdowns, made up for that. I said he threw for 33 yards week 1. Well, he went 20-25 for 281 yards this game, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. That pick he threw came first play of the game. He was essentially flawless after that pick. He also rushed 5 times for 87 yards and a touchdown. Led the Vandals in rushing 2nd week in a row, averaging just under 100 yards per game rushing through 2 games so far. So Idaho, who look, they're like a lot of the teams at the top. They have a lot of identity changing. They have to figure out what their production is. Who's going to step up in the different rooms, like the receiving room for Idaho. It's completely new guys, but Idaho spread the ball around pretty well. They moved the ball fantastic, but at the same time this week, Idaho was nowhere near as effective defensively as they were against WSU. I mean, they gave up more than twice as many yards to St. Thomas, 472, as they did to WSU in week 1. And St. Thomas was able to move the ball both through the air and on the ground, averaged 6 yards a rush against Idaho. So look, like I said, every team in this top 4, they've all got reasons to feel confident, and they've all got reasons to have people kind of, squinting, wondering what's going on here. For Idaho, it's, hey, can they get the offense and defense to kind of show up on the same page at some point? If they can, this is a team that's going to beat the shit out of a lot of teams. If Idaho cannot, this is a team that's going to keep teams in games that they should not. Another huge problem Idaho's had both games is penalties. The big one, like against St. Thomas, Idaho with 13 penalties for 104 yards. They still held on for the win, but 104 yards is big. Now, some of those I thought were bullshit, but like, hey, this is how it is in the Big Sky. There's no one who's going to leave a Big Sky game thinking like their team did not become the recipient of some shitty calls. Idaho, no exception here. But I voted Idaho higher than 3. But they're, like I said, every team here, we're 2 weeks in, the teams above Idaho have glaring demerits in their resume too, just like the team below Idaho. UC Davis has some glaring demerits in their resume. Like, maybe the takeaway at this point is this early on, I don't know who the national championship contender is out of the Big Sky, but we certainly have some good teams. Crew had 76 and St. Thomas has good O-line and some good skill on offense. They absolutely do. But to be fair, Crewhead, hey, if this was a Montana State show talking about a narrow win of another Big Sky team over a Pioneer Conference team, like, you wouldn't say, well, that team's going to get my number 1 vote, right? So I mostly think the takeaway is, one, the Pioneer Conference, actually the top of it might be a little bit better this year than it's typical. Usually it kind of feels like it's D2 level, but like we talked about, San Diego beat Southern Utah. St. Thomas hung with Idaho. Presbyterian picked up a big win too. So there's some teams that are usually like walkovers that they're not this year, but Idaho got through theirs. My temperature on Idaho is I am very, very high on Idaho. Having seen both their games, the things that they can correct, like the things that are holding them back, seem imminently correctable. But they've got to do it. Honestly, I think Idaho looks right now the way people thought the way people who are high on Sac State, they probably feel the way Idaho is right now, or they think Idaho is right now what they thought Sac State would have been, which is a team that certainly has some talent that needs to get things to gel. That is Idaho. But the Vandals, they're going to be able to score the ball. Offensive line absolutely looks better. No, unequivocally, no question. Moving on to the number 2 team in the conference, a team with, and hey, if this was a lower team in the conference, we would spend no time. Montana, they sit at 1-0 after beating Division II Central Washington in their only game. That was a 42-17 game for the Grizz. They had that highly coveted week 1 bye last week. So the Grizz are just going to play they're going to play out through the rest of the season. And as we know, Montana, because of who that program is, and this is a compliment, they're going to have, look, they've got a big matchup this week versus North Dakota. That might be the FCS game of the week. North Dakota's top 10 team. Montana's in the polls at top 10. We'll see what that actually means. Montana has as many new faces on their roster as any team in the Big Sky. But what did we see from Montana in week 1? Quarterback, which has been a question in Montana for a while. The starter was clearly Keely Ayat. Went 14-24 for 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. He produces typically on the ground. Was not productive on the ground this game, but that's a part of Ayat's games. He can run. He's especially a red zone threat. Eli Gilman was probably the story for Montana. Rushed 15 times for 198 yards and 3 touchdowns. The question for Montana, the 2 big questions offensively for Montana this year. What's going to happen with quarterback is, can Ayat push the ball downfield enough? And hey, I will say, if I'm a Grizz fan, seeing Ayat go 2 touchdowns, 2 picks against the D2 team, not ecstatic about what that means against a good team like North Dakota this week. But the other question is, hey, Eli Gilman, one of the most talented backs in the Big Sky, has very, very few 20-carry games. That's just how Hawks used him. Will they let Eli Gilman touch the ball enough to be the most productive back in the Big Sky, or at least compete for it? That's to me what I'm watching here. 15 carries. Against a D2 team, you don't need that guy to have 25 carries, but it's just been weird that Gilman doesn't usually get the touches that you'd think he gets. But on the flip side, in the receiving room, Michael Wortham, transfer from Eastern Washington, All-American punt kick returner. He's essentially replacing Junior Bergen. He looks like a guy who's going to get some touches. 6 catches for 120 yards and a touchdown. Also had 4 rushes for 29 yards as well. He did lose a fumble. We'll see what that matters. He's averaged 25 yards on his kick returns, which you would call that very normal. Did have a 41-yard punt return as well. So I think Wortham's going to matter for W. Honestly, I think Wortham might matter more than anyone else for Montana if he can become their new. If he can produce similar to like what Junior Bergen did the last year. Crew had 76, and Montana's going to lose. I don't know who I'm going to pick for Montana, North Dakota, because I would say like North Dakota's look pretty damn good, and I don't think taking a minute to pull away from Central Washington means anything, but it also doesn't mean Montana's not good. Halftime score of that game was 21-17, and then Montana shut Central out 21-0 in the second half. So it took the team a minute to get rolling. I think, but the question for Montana is more like, hey, how's Ayat going to produce? And I don't care what he did against Central Washington, other than to say throwing 2 picks against Central is not making me really feel super confident about Ayat. Before we talk about the number 1 team in our conference, talking about show sponsor Snake River Stampede Canadian Whiskey, one of the best economic and best quality buys of whiskey in the state of Idaho. The entry-level Snake River Stampede, it's a 3-grain whiskey, 80% corn, 10% rye, 10% malted barley, double barrel finish, first in ex-bourbon casks, then finished for 6 months in Oloroso sherry casks. Now, if you want to celebrate a big win, which I would not call the Montana win over Central Washington a big win, you can get their 1915 small batch. It's a double barrel finish as well. It's aged an additional 2 years, and its double barrel finish is ex bourbon barrels, then ex Canadian rye whiskey casks. Either way, you can't go wrong. They're both fantastic whiskeys and fantastic economic buys. Grab yourself some Snake River today. Number 1, again, every team this level, you're gonna have some demerits in your resume, and that's Montana State. Montana State does not have a win this year, and They're number one. They're the highest rated team in the Big Sky poll, nationally in polls. But that's, like I said, like out of conference schedules are not created equal. You might say if Montana State had Idaho's schedule, they'd have at least a win if they'd had WSU and St. Thomas instead of Oregon and South Dakota State. I'm not going to care about the Oregon game for Montana State. They got their asses kicked. Oregon's a really good team. That means nothing. Montana State did not have catastrophic injuries that I'm aware of from that game. The big game here for Montana State is losing at home in double overtime, 30-24 to South Dakota State. And the returns are a little mixed, honestly, on both teams here. So what Montana State do well? Did not move the ball that well considering it was double overtime, but South Dakota State looks really good defensively. They held Sac State to 3 total points. Quarterback Justin Lamson from Montana State, transfer from Stanford. He kind of looks like the JV Tommy Mellott. He can pass okay, 18-24 for 123 yards. But, like Kevin Marshall said on Tubbs of the Club, can he hit a 8-yard slant at 3rd and 7? Yes, he can. So he's not going to, I've said, do not confuse this dude for player of the year, but all he has to do is be good enough. He's also dual threat, rushed 20 times for 96 yards and a touchdown against Montana State. He was the leading rush against South Dakota State. He was leading rusher for the Bobcats in this game. Shockingly, Adam Jones, who Big Sky preseason offensive player of the year, 9 carries for 30 yards and a touchdown. Julius Davis, who led the Bobcats in rushing a couple of years ago, 12 carries for 76 yards. The Bobcats were able to rush a little bit, 210 yards on the ground in the game, rush for 2 touchdowns, but they didn't come away with the W. My takeaway is South Dakota State looks good. The turnover battle was completely even, 2-2 here. And Montana State kind of got bailed out. I don't know if you call it bailed out. Like they got a touchdown off, at least one touchdown off muffed punt, which was part of that was South Dakota State, but part of that was the coverage for Montana State as well. So my takeaway is if this was a heavyweight matchup of 2 top 5 teams, neither of the 2 top 5 teams looked bad at all. They both looked like top 5 was where they were. So Ron Lowney saying the blame goes on the coaches. They put up more yards. South Dakota State was 1 of 13 on 3rd downs, and Montana State still found a way to lose. Absolutely fair points. And I don't really have a pushback. You're completely right. I'm looking at the box score right now. Yeah, South Dakota State 1 of 13 on 3rd down. Montana State was 5 of 15. I think South Dakota State's a really, really tough football team, but I think they're also not spectacular offensively. I think they want and they will keep many games low scoring like this. They scored 20 against Sac State as well. Certainly did not light the world on fire offensively, but they don't have to. They look like they might be the best defensive team in the nation. But my takeaway from Montana State is we knew they had dudes they had to replace. If you look at the Montana State schedule, moving on, they open with easily the toughest first 2 weeks of Big Sky play in the entire conference. Not close. They host San Diego and Mercyhurst. Now, San Diego, like I said, they no longer necessarily look like a walkover, having beaten Southern Utah, but Southern Utah is certainly not Montana State. Montana State has every reason to believe they're going to win their next 3 games of San Diego, Mercyhurst, then Eastern Washington. Their next kind of big matchup in my mind isn't until October 4th at Northern Arizona, but they've got a while to work some things out. They're the number 1 team in the Big Sky polls because honestly, I think people just kind of value the output against South Dakota State over, let's say, some of the teams like Idaho, who had a good outing against Washington State, because we know who South Dakota State is. We know they're good. There can be some variables in the FCS, FBS matchups that it's just hard to really take away. But look, keep tuning in, guys. There's a lot of things we're going to cover this season. One thing, I'm just going to talk about this as a topic. Hey, Ron Lowney, thanks again. Saying 2 block kicks the week before and gave up another one. No excuse for that. So hey, special teams looks like it is a bit of a question for Montana State. Like I said, every all of the top 4 teams, they've got questions. They've all got demerits in their resume. We're early in the college football season. We're also just we can be honest here, in 2025 college football, every team's going to have a lot of roster turnover. So how teams handle that, and what also like how your schedule lets you handle that, is pretty. It's completely variable, and it can explain why teams look like they are. The big things that I would say are like my notes or my observations I think to keep paying attention to is going down the list real quick. Is one, Montana State. They looked very tough against a good South Dakota State team who we know is going to advance in the playoffs. The next step is Montana State has just been dominant both offensively and defensively. What does this team look like with Justin Lamson at quarterback? And this is a story for me in Montana State. I don't want to like exaggerate it, but I don't think it should be ignored. Montana State lost generational talent on the offensive line last year. That is not nothing to have to deal with. Lost a dude who transferred to Michigan State as a starter and an All-American graduated. Like that's a very, very big deal for teams to have to handle. Offensive linemen are usually not like national names, but I honestly think that change for Montana State will matter pretty much as losing Tommy Mellott to the NFL. So that's what I'm paying attention to with Montana State is, hey, like this team has more to replace than most people are willing to acknowledge at a national level. They've now got 3 weeks to really get things rolling. What do they look like after those 3 weeks? They've got to be 3-2. I think they will be, but they've got to be. And this is just like Ron said, Justin Lamson is not Tommy Mellott. Last year, obviously Montana State had the single quarterback you'd say was the best. He won the Walter Payton Award for a reason, right? Montana State does not have the best quarterback in the league. No question. They do not. That means things are going to, the actual distribution of production is going to change for Montana State, but that's the thing offensively we're looking at is suddenly they do not have the guy who dominates the entire league. What does this team look like? Talking about Montana, the thing we already talked about, hey, can Ayat make it as a quarterback? But the other thing, Michael Wortham is a very good player. Is he going to, will Michael Wortham and will Eli Gilman get enough touches in Montana to put up some points? Because I think that I would not trust Montana defensively yet. It's the entire 2 deep is new. We'll see what they look like when they're not playing Central Washington. They're productive against Central Washington, but I take as much from that as I take from Montana State losing to Oregon, which is to say nothing. So we're gonna see the North Dakota State game. I think will tell us a lot about the Grizz. For Idaho, I think Idaho may have the best quarterback in the Big Sky. I absolutely believe in Joshua Wood. I believe Joshua Wood is much more what we saw against St. Thomas than what we saw against Washington State. So I'm fine going on record. If I were power ranking quarterbacks or if I were drafting quarterbacks in the Big Sky, I would draft Joshua Wood first before any other dude in the Big Sky. Like you might think about Ty Pennington, but I would unequivocally, I'm fine saying, yeah, Joshua Wood's got to take. I think that has exploded the ceiling of what Idaho football can be this year. But Idaho football is also going to be offensively far more reliant on the quarterback itself, just like the team below at UC Davis. They're going to be far more reliant on Caden Pinnock than they had been in previous years. So the question is there is like, hey, can those dudes stay healthy for both Idaho and UC Davis? Because those guys are both runners. That means they're going to take some hits. Can they stay healthy into a playoff run? And then on the Idaho end, it's, okay, they just look complete polar opposites week 1, week 2. If they can get the offense and defense both looking good on a given week, they'll beat anyone. But if they can't get control of their penalties, they're going to keep some teams in the games that they don't really want to. That's all I'm going to talk about here. Sorry, the other topic that I want to hit for 10 seconds, I'll get to it after I talk about, hey, support the show, patreon.com/Tubbs at the Club. So you can do it from the Idaho end if you want to. And if you're an Idaho fan, I don't know how you could not possibly be part of our Discord. It's the best place to talk Idaho sports online. But if you're just in the Big Sky, hey, we talk non-Big Sky. We talk non-Idaho games too. Our non-Big Sky game threads are pretty active. So support the show. It's less than a cup of coffee a month. Patreon.com/Tubbs at the Club. The other thing, hey, this is just, I'm only going to talk about this once and just let this be something we move on from. there were a lot of really close Mountain West Big Sky games this year. All of them, the Mountain West happened to hold on to, but I'm talking Idaho loses to WSU by 3. I'm talking Sac State loses to Nevada by 3. I'm talking, I mean, it was a 10-point game ultimately, but late in the fourth quarter, Idaho State looked like they legitimately might beat New Mexico. And honestly, hey, Jason X, head coach at New Mexico, this is the closest a Jason X team has played Idaho State. When he was at Idaho, Idaho beat the shit out of Idaho State all 3 times. And this time at New Mexico with theoretically better talent, the game was close. Idaho State also hung with UNLV as well. And like talked about, Northern Colorado got robbed. The refs took a win from the Big Sky away from Northern Colorado with that egregious call on what should have been a catch. I'm saying that because I think that's a thing to watch moving forward as college football evolves. The Mountain West and the Big Sky difference is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. So being able to pick up Mountain West wins, I believe, is something you're just going to see a little bit more often in college football post 2025 and on than we'd seen before, especially when you factor in that at every level, the roster turnover is so great. Those lower FBS teams are not yet set either. So if they're ripe for an upset, it's in those first couple weeks. And I'm saying that because I like the Big Sky as a conference, and I really think there is not that much difference between the Big Sky and the Mountain West. There is not that much difference between the Big Sky and what will be the new Pac-12. I think watching those out of conference games. Hey, Idaho has a shot at San Jose State in 2 weeks. San Jose State not looking like world beaters exactly. That's another team that's vulnerable. So hey, just we know that the ideal for Big Sky teams is to have more FCS matchups and ideally some of the smaller conference like Pioneer schools. But for the schools that can schedule those FBS, Mountain West, Pac-12, if they can ever get MAC level games, those are pay games that are legitimately potential wins for the better Big Sky schools. Just keep watching that. Thanks for supporting the show, guys. Thanks for being here this week. I will see you next Sunday at a variable time. It's probably going to be late, but that's just how it is. Until then, I'm going to send you off with whatever video I happen to find. Until next time, Ron's going to say go Bobcats. Someone else is going to say go Grizz. I'm always going to say go Vandals.